Welcome to the Arsenal Women Arsecast on Arseblog.com with me, your host, Tim Stillman. It's fair to say there's been quite a bit going on in the world of Arsenal women in the last few days. First of all, last Monday, we had the confirmation, the announcement that Jonas Eidevall would be the new head coach of Arsenal Women. Jonas is still managing Rosengard until the 12th of July, but he will come in and take over from Joe Montemuro. And that is really what this episode will focus on. But also on Friday, we had the confirmation of Nikita Paris's transfer from Lyon to Arsenal. And we've got a couple of articles up on Arseblog News at the moment. One, an analysis I wrote of Nikita and her game and her data and how she might fit into this team. And also I had a chance to have a chat with Nikita on Friday afternoon. And I printed that article on Arseblog News, so you can go and read it there. I think towards the end of the summer window, we'll perhaps do an episode on all of the transfer business, both in and out, once it's all complete. But from what I can gather, there are really wheels turning in the background now. So we might see some other signings coming in the next few weeks. The girls getting back together for pre-season soon. And obviously also on Friday, we had the Champions League draw. And so Arsenal will face, and I really should have looked this up before I started recording, the name of the Kazakhstani opposition that they will be playing on August the 18th. And if they win that game, they will play the winner of PSV Eindhoven versus CSKA versus Lokomotiv Moscow, and then if they win both of those games, they go through to the playoff, which will be played on 31st of August / 1st of September will be the first leg. 7th, 8th of September, second leg, and that will be a home and away format. So lots of work for Arsenal to do before they get into the Champions League group stages. But again, we're not really going to focus on that in this episode. That's something we might focus on a little bit closer to the time. But instead, this is an episode very much devoted to finding out a little bit more about our new manager, Jonas Eidevall, 38-year-old coach. Spent his whole career in Sweden to this point, not very widely known in England, but fair to say he's very widely known in Sweden. And so that's kind of where we focused some of our attention. And we've got two great guests lined up for you for this episode to talk about Jonas. First of all, Alex and I spoke to Anita Asante, ex-Arsenal player, Champions League winner with Arsenal, of course, in 2007, currently at Aston Villa. She played under Jonas for 2 years during her time in Sweden at Rosengard. And what she said was really enthusing. She raved about him. So hopefully gets you excited for the new appointment. And then after that, we talked to Swedish journalist, analyst, photographer. Not sure there's a lot she doesn't do around Swedish women's football. Mia Eriksson, to get her insight on Jonas and I guess what he's like. And a little bit maybe of insight on Frida Marnum, 21-year-old Norwegian midfielder who Arsenal are heavily linked with at the moment. And Mia knows Frida both as a player and as a person as well pretty well. So we had a short conversation about Frida, but I didn't want to jinx anything, so I didn't go into it too much. So without further ado, we will cut now to the interview with myself and Alex Ibaseta with Anita Asante. Hope you enjoy it. Joining us now on the show, 4-time FA Cup winner, 5-time league title winner and European Cup winner with Arsenal, current Aston Villa defender, Anita Asante. Anita, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
And obviously, I've been wanting to get you on the pod for ages anyway, but obviously with the announcement that Jonas Eidevall will take over at Arsenal this season, and you played under him, of course. So we'll ask you plenty of searching questions, myself and Alex, about Jonas. But at the start, it would be remiss of me not to ask you about the 2007 Champions League winning season, which you were a key part of for Arsenal. First of all, did you know that you're the only member of the starting 11 from the final who's still playing?
No, I don't think I did. I hadn't really thought about it. I leave everyone else to deal with the stats and all of that stuff. But no, that's pretty cool. I'll take that platitude.
And did you, when that happened, and obviously Arsenal won the quadruple, but really the Champions League win was the big one, and I was at Boreham Wood that day, and it was really obvious what it meant to all of the players in the squad. Did you realise the enormity of what you'd done that day, or is it something that's dawned on you more and more over the years?
I think it's something, the 2000 European Cup win was like something that has dawned on me definitely more and more, as I've gone on, because of just, it not being broken still as well. And the time and length it's taken for, another English club to sort of do that again. I think at the time we knew it was a massive big deal because the dominant teams in Europe were the German clubs, Swedish clubs, and we historically hadn't got surpassed, those final stages. So it was a huge deal for us. And it meant, like you said, a great deal to not only us as the players, but I think the club. And, we all felt like we were part of a really good club with a great feeling and a club that was behind us and wanted to see us succeed. So, it was a phenomenal achievement as a group, but the feeling I think will live with us forever.
And rightly so. And obviously Arsenal played, you referenced the Swedish clubs there, and Arsenal played Umeå in the final. That day, it was over 2 legs, the final. But obviously, one of the big reason we've got you on today is because you played under Jonas Eidevall, and you played in Sweden for a few years yourself. What was it that kind of attracted you to go to Sweden? And you stayed there for quite a long time, so you must have really liked it. What were your experiences like playing in Sweden?
Yeah, so I went to play in Sweden off the back of playing in the American League. And I just, wanted to experience something different, again, be in a different football environment, learn from, a different culture in terms of coaching and the football experience. And I first landed in Gothenburg, and after sort of a, decent 2 seasons there, Jonas basically recruited me to our then rival team in Rosengard in Malmö. And, I knew they were a really good team. They were one of the top teams in Sweden at the time and always had competitive games against them. And I felt like, this is a team and a manager that could definitely develop me further and bring me into a more competitive environment as well.
And going off the back of that, after your time at the Swedish League, you came back to the WSL. So kind of what was the main contrast that you saw between both leagues?
Well, I think the Swedish League, had historically done very well considering the market that it's in terms of the sort of football economy, of the game, because, we're quite fortunate in the UK that we have, big English clubs that are global brands. And so I think the major contrast was seeing coming back to Chelsea and seeing how far it had integrated into the whole structure of the club and the accessibility they had to certain resources, the training pitches, the day-to-day professional environment, had developed significantly from my time playing in the UK before, because obviously when I played at Arsenal, we trained twice a week, and all of that, and in the evenings, and then to come to a pro environment where you're training every day, with top level coaches and players. It showed how far the game had developed. And
talking about Jonas again, that transition that you just mentioned of, it is very two contrasting leagues and all sorts of aspects. How do you see Jonas, his transition going from the Swedish League to the WSL, both on a footballistic wise, but also on a coaching personality wise?
Well, when I had Jonas as a coach, he, is very enthusiastic. He's always learning, evolving, sharing his ideas. He's super passionate. I mean, some might describe him as obsessed. He's so into the tactical game. And I think as a coach, that's what he was like on the pitch. He was very good at motivating, a group of players and, really believing in the potential of his players as well. And I think that's a skill set that is, incredibly important, and will definitely be able to transfer into this league. I think the biggest difference for him as well will be just the level of interest and scrutiny that's involved in the women's game. I mean, I know that is across the board, but I think even more so in the UK now, with just how much the FAWSL has grown. There'll definitely be more eyeballs watching every single move and be interested as well as to what he can bring that's different.
Yeah, one of the things actually that just before his press conference, the Arsenal press officer said to me was, I don't think he's ever had this, like doing press conferences and things like that and having this level of media support before. I guess lots of people, myself included, really tried to find out who Arsenal were going to recruit as the manager. And I put my hands up as completely unsuccessful, had no idea until about 2 minutes before it was announced. So Arsenal kept this very close guarded. What was were you surprised at all by this appointment? I just wanted to gauge your reaction when it was announced.
Well, I think my initial reaction was, wow, amazing. That's a great job. Like, honestly, I think, as an ex-Arsenal player, I was sort of like, good job. You've done well there to recruit Jonas, because maybe not everyone was looking in his direction. Profile of coaches and managers are the same as looking at high profile players, I suppose. But I think he has shown that he has the ability to win things with good players and in a good structured environment where he's also able to bring his best qualities. And I think his temperament, I think his player management skills is something that is sometimes undervalued in sport. And I think sometimes that's bigger than anything else, tactically or anything else sometimes, that can get a group galvanized and together very quickly in a job of which he's going to have to do. Obviously, Arsenal is an ambitious club and they want to, be back in the top in terms of the league and in Europe and things like that. So, he definitely has the right characteristics, I believe, to bring out the best in the group and rather quickly, since they're going to have Champions League games creeping up, fast and furious. So, honestly, my initial reaction was there's a lot of people that are going to have questions and they don't necessarily know a great deal about him. But from my personal experience, which was a positive one, and knowing that he's managed top players and, some might describe as big ego players, I don't think this environment will faze him.
Yeah, one of the things he said in the press conference, and one of the things I've been told is that that he said, I'm very direct, is what he said. In terms of his communication style with players. And, Arsenal have come away from Joe Montemuro, who was direct, I think, but in a different way, much more kind of laid back, personable in his approach to people, if not to football. Whereas it sounds to me like Jonas is quite different to that. Was he quite direct when he coached you? And how did all of the players respond to that?
Yeah, I think Jonas, when he coached me, was kind of, direct in the sense of his information. He's a coach that knows exactly what he wants to achieve with a group of players, his playing style, roles and responsibilities. And he's very detailed in that, and he'll be very clear. But I don't see that as a bad thing. I think a lot of players like to know where they stand, within a team and within a squad. They like to know what is expected of them in order to sort of drive their own goals and their own standards as well. And I think it keeps the group in a way to a higher standard and probably leaves less room for questions. Because, as a coach, when you're trying to coach something and you've not been clear, then you're going to get 20 questions and it just takes away from your training session or what you're trying to develop. So I think that's his style. And I think most of us adapted really well to it. And, I think that's why we were successful under him, because we all understood sort of the identity of our club as a Rosengard and how we wanted to play.
And then taking that and looking at the specific personalities and the names on this current Arsenal squad, the Katie McCabe's, the Kim Littles, the Vivienne Miedema, the Lydia Williams, all these players have very different personalities on and off the pitch. How do you see Jonas's philosophies and his directiveness fitting into this current Arsenal squad?
Well, I think, Jonas he's still Swedish at the end of the day. So, on the pitch, he's going to, go to work and he's going to try and, firm in his ideas as a coach and his belief systems into the players. He's obviously talked about being a ball possession type of coach. I think the players will enjoy that. That's what we all identify Arsenal as a team over the years. So he won't probably detract from that. If anything, he will just probably, put his own stamp on what he wants. Off the pitch, I think he still has that sensibility. I think he still understands how to interact with people on a social level. I think he would, take the approach of being quite open. And, that's how I found him to be, like, easy going as well off the pitch. And you can have a normal conversation and he'll talk to you about all sorts of things. It could be politics, history, law, you name it. He is a very wide, knowledgeable guy, and he's very personable. And he has, character. He can be funny too. So I think, of course, it will take time, like anyone getting to know someone new. But I think he has the ability to really gel with a group quite quickly.
And obviously, we've mentioned the very, very crowded Arsenal schedule, especially at the beginning of the season. He doesn't have a lot of time to kind of settle in correctly. Obviously, with players off at the Olympics, he only has half the squad to fit into that. So considering, the rough start to the season, we'll call it that. Hopefully it isn't too rough on paper, but the scheduling for now. What are you expecting from an Arsenal team coached by Jonas in this first season?
Well, I guess I'm expecting an Arsenal team that fundamentally understands what they're doing in and out of possession collectively. A team that's going to play on its strengths, wherever they identify their main threats are, to try and play through that, I can imagine. I think, a lot of people, there's been a lot of talk about, I guess, confidence when Arsenal play the other top sides in the WSL and the likes of Chelsea and Man City. So he's going to also probably have to develop and work on that psychological aspect of this club and bringing in that kind of resilience and that kind of never say die attitude to a full game. I can imagine him bringing that, because that is his personality, I think, and he is definitely passionate from the side, and he'll definitely push his players. I think that's what we can expect. Of course, it's going to be a challenge. I think he understands that, but he's a young and ambitious coach, and he has a great group of players to work with.
And the other thing I've been told about him, Anita, is that, again, probably quite contrary to Joe, on the sidelines, he's, can get himself into trouble with fourth officials quite a lot, and that he coaches not just on the training pitch, but from the technical area. Was that what he was like when he coached you?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's going to be fun for others to witness and see. I think on face value, when you first see Jonas and meet him, you don't necessarily expect that from him, but he can get really obviously involved in the game. And obviously, it's part of wanting to win and wanting your team to succeed. He can be animated like any coach, I suppose, but it's even more fun because it's him. And it's, I guess not typically always associated with Scandinavians.
Yeah, absolutely. And you referenced some of it there. The first question I asked him actually was about, Arsenal's single biggest problem last season, the last couple of seasons, has been when they play Chelsea and Man City, and Chelsea and Man City put that high press on. I don't think we ever found the answer under that with Joe. And I asked him about that, whether he thought that was a technical thing, a tactical thing, psychological, whether it's to do with player positioning. And he said, I was expecting him to say, it's maybe a bit of all four, but he said, no, it's positioning. For me, he said, my job is that when they come under pressure, they know where the player is, so they don't get stressed. And, he talked a lot about that kind of positioning in possession. Does that kind of strike a chord in terms of his methodology with you? Yeah,
I mean, I definitely, I think, like I said before, he's the sort of coach that will definitely be clear and have clarity for the group. And if that's something he's identified, then, I know he would have spent hours looking at things, footage, all sorts of things to make sure that he can problem solve and provide solutions for the team. And it is part of the way we played, the DNA, like having a blueprint that everybody understands for situations like when you are stressed, to reduce that stress. So, it definitely is something that I would attribute to his coaching style.
And we keep talking about it there. Sorry, I just slipped. Like his direct personality, the Scandinavian kind of personality, which is very different to someone like Joe, who was very warm and was always kind of laid back in all his press conferences and all the post-match things. And I just wanted to kind of, obviously, you know him a lot better in terms of personality and kind of behind the scenes. How do you think that the media, the fans are going to receive his, different personality on the sideline, on the press conferences, on what he wants? Because he, even in that first press conference, Tim asked him a lot of questions. We all asked him questions and he knew exactly what he was going to say. He knew, he was very confident in what he wants to do and what he believed in. So kind of, what do you think the reception is going to be?
Well, I think like most football fans, you always do in the comparison game. So that naturally will happen. I know Joe was well liked and, at the club, and the players adored him too. So that's natural. It'll take a while, I think, for everyone to gravitate maybe towards him and his personality. But I think what you'll find is someone that is, a super professional, totally understands how to work with the media, understands, the interaction for fans and players and how important that is. And I think, the warm and fuzziness, he won't be concerned if people don't see that from him. I don't think he will mind so much if the fans or the media don't reference him in the same way, because he will know exactly how he's cultivating that relationship with the players. And as long as he has the players on board and he gets them to play in a way that everyone enjoys and also brings success, I think the rest will follow naturally. So yeah, just knowing him as a person, I think, he is a nice person. He is. It's not that he's not. I don't think, Joe is one particular personality that seems to be that way with media, with fans and everyone like that. But I think, Jonas will prioritize the team as his main focus and how they relate to him, and everything else is a bonus.
And then everyone else just has to deal with it.
Yeah.
No matter what. And then going a bit more on the analysis side, we mentioned there that, Man City and Chelsea were kind of two of biggest Arsenal's downsides to the season, particularly this past season. The results didn't go Arsenal's way at all. And it did seem like it was like those little kind of corrections that needed to be made, the high press and knowing what to do and how to get out of that high press. Seeing that it is, it seems to be just like these little corrections that Arsenal need to do in order to get forward from that, because the scorelines weren't big, with the exception of maybe one game. But the scorelines were relatively tight. Do you think that he's going to have an immediate impact on these particular games?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, what we're referencing is game management and understanding, I guess, that when you play other top sides, you will come under stress. So it's about how players manage that feeling and how they problem solve. But instead of having to work out maybe 4 or 5 scenarios in their minds when they're stressed, he will be able to hone down, simple solutions for them to break out and everyone be on the same page. Because I think perhaps, at times they probably weren't adaptable enough to those situations. So he will want to address that straight away. And I definitely think if he's able to do that quickly, you will see a difference, most likely, when they do come up against the likes of Man City and Chelsea.
A question I had as well, Anita, is obviously to do with his age. He's 38, but he's a very experienced coach. And obviously when you played under him, he must have been late 20s, early 30s. And obviously there's not a lot of distance in age between kind of the two of you. Yeah. I was just wondering, like what that, and I know that's probably a bit more common in women's football, for example, but I just wondered what that was like, I guess, being coached at that stage of your career by someone who's a very similar age to you.
Yeah, I guess it's funny because I didn't even realize how old or young he was until recently, because it was never something that came up. It was never something we thought about. We looked at him as our coach and he drove the environment. And it's a unique thing, I guess, in the women's game as well, to have someone in such close age proximity. But, his maturity and his level of knowledge instantly garnered the respect of me and all my teammates. And his proven track record, if you like, in terms of success with Rosengard in the past was also a reason to just, 100% buy in to his playing ideology and things like that. So I kind of think it's also sometimes a positive thing, because I think it made him very relatable to the players. And he, instead of, being a kind of hierarchical thing, players and the coach, it kind of felt like he was just an extension of our group. And he has lots of interesting ways to incorporate motivating statements and videos and things from other parts of the sport, other sports as well. So, I think it's a very unique thing, but it's great to see, I think, in general, more and more young, ambitious coaches with success who are also challenging themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And my final question before I hand over to Alex for the last couple, I guess Arsenal's other big issue has been injuries over the last couple of years. And I had a look at Jonas's LinkedIn, and he's published some blogs on there. And one of them is actually about, I think he entitled it Marginal Gains, Never Give Up. So I think we're building a picture here of a very methodical guy. But he wrote a blog about the importance of warming up before the second half, for example. And I'm just wondering, on the fitness management side, what your experiences were of working with him, and I guess, without being able to diagnose exactly, relating that to the injury issues Arsenal have had over the years, because I'm certain that Arsenal would have asked him that question when they interviewed him about injury management.
Yeah, I think Jonas is a type of guy that, like you say, he expands his mind and his knowledge, and he's reading up on things all the time. And he would lean on expertise as well from people within the game for that support. And in my experience, I remember we had one season where we didn't have a single injury. And that was because we had a phenomenal sports scientist involved in our club, and he leaned on her expertise as well. And it worked very relatively well for us. So I can imagine that he would take the same approach. And like you said, in terms of his blogs, in terms of warming up at halftime and things like that, how many teams do you see that don't warm up at halftime? That's, quite a small thing and basic thing, but there's a lot of teams that still don't. So, even if a simple thing like that, he thinks is introduced to the Arsenal side, it can make a huge difference in terms of the injuries. But just knowing him, I know he wouldn't leave any sort of stone unturned when it comes to this area, because he would understand more than anyone the importance of having a fit squad in the kind of game schedule that Arsenal is going to face as well.
The more you talk, Anita, the more hopeful I am for the season. But I'm an Arsenal fan, so I can't get too hopeful either, because historically it doesn't go too well. But looking at Arsenal also, but looking at the WSL as a wider kind of holistic approach as well, how important was it for Arsenal to get a new coach? We mentioned way earlier that a lot of people aren't looking in his direction, whether it be because he's Swedish and coming from a Swedish league that is, I wouldn't say smaller, because it is a really good league, but it doesn't have the same attention as, say, Spain, England. How important is it for the league to continue to get these different personalities from different leagues come into the WSL and kind of plant their philosophies and their style of play?
I think it's incredibly important for the WSL to, keep bringing in interesting coaches, innovative coaches from leagues such as the Swedish league, because it's sometimes very easy to lean on what we think is high profile when we don't always understand the environment of those clubs and what they have on offer. But, with someone like Jonas, lots of players, could be spoken to just get a simple reference as to what he could bring to a team. And I just think it shows, just like players, we move around, we have transfers. You're starting to see that movement in terms of management and coaches, because they want to expand themselves as well. And they also want to be able to work in, good structured clubs with good talent pools, whether that be directly in the senior women's team or through their youth pathways. So I think it's a great opportunity for him, and it also will signal to other coaches and foreign coaches that might seek the WSL as a potential home in the future, that this is a good league and a good environment to be in, and one that's going to continue to grow in terms of interest.
Yeah, we definitely hope so. And kind of final question from me is, we mentioned that you came from the English league, then from the American league straight to Sweden. For you personally, as a player who's been around kind of a very English environment for a lot of your career, what was the main kind of takeaway, something that you valued the most playing under Jonas?
Well, I think the thing I would say I valued the most, like I said earlier, is that he felt like an extension of the team, not necessarily just your boss. If there was a tough fitness day, sometimes he's joining in and he's encouraging you, he's pushing you, he's like, come on, and as a player, sometimes you need that, you need to feel they understand this is painful. We don't always want to do it, but they're involved. And like I said, he's a great motivator as well. He has ways to inspire, I think, a whole group of people, because he's got lots of interest and he follows lots of different other sports as well. And it kind of opens up the minds of players as well. I think we would watch things and be like, wow, yeah, that's cool. Ask him about it. And so, yeah, I think that's the thing I valued the most. But more importantly, he created a very competitive environment. So, when I played at Rosengard at the time, that's what I felt I got every day. And as a player, you want to feel that you can improve every day to some degree, whether it be big or small, but that you got something out of it. And he will definitely bring that.
Anita, thanks so much for your insight. And I don't know about Alex, but I feel even more enthused. I was really interested in this appointment, and I thought there were some traps Arsenal could have fallen into with this appointment. And I'm actually quite glad to see, I don't want to say left field, but something that really looks like they've done their research and they've done their homework and everything like that. And that really stacks up with what you said. So thanks so much for joining the show today.
Just to add,
Sure.
Sorry, just to add, Jonas has worked with, if you look at players that have progressed and gone on to bigger teams, I think it's important to mention that, he has worked with the likes of Marta, he's worked with the likes of Sarah Bjork, Gunnarsdottir, Ramona Backman, a lot of top players that have gone on to other big European clubs. So he'll definitely be able to, I think, even develop those players that he has at Arsenal furthermore.
Yeah, big time. And I think there might be a couple of players he's managed before that might turn up at the club. There's lots of rumours about Simone Sorensen at the moment. So yeah, absolutely. And Sweden, is such a great league for that level of talent. I mean, Marta, that kind of says it all. Swedish citizen and all.
Marta and Kristen Press together. I always forget that happened at one point.
Yeah, exactly. So Anita, thanks so much, and best of luck for the season coming up with Aston Villa. Of course, also under an exciting new manager in Carla Ward.
Indeed.
And yeah, we'll speak to you very soon. But thank you for coming onto the show.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks, Alex, for having me.
So that was the insight of Arsenal quadruple winner, Olympian, current Aston Villa defender Anita Asante on Jonas. And I hope you found that as fascinating as I did, and as encouraging as I did, actually, because Anita has played under some really, really good coaches. She's played under Vic Akers. She's played under Emma Hayes. She's played with some of the best players in the world, like Marta, for example, Kelly Smith, players of that ilk. So, I think it's fair to say her threshold is quite high in terms of what she's experienced in women's football. So to hear her be so positive and enthusiastic about Jonas is really encouraging, I think. Now we're going to hear from Swedish journalist Mia Eriksson, and she's just going to give us a little bit of her insight into Jonas Eidevall and her experiences of him and watching his teams in the Damallsvenskan. Okay, joining us now on the show is Swedish football journalist, photographer, analyst. I'm not sure if there's anything you don't do around Swedish women's football. Mia Eriksson. Mia, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Mia, I wanted to get your perspective on Arsenal's appointment of Jonas Eidevall as the new coach, and we had some interesting discussions about it offline. But my first kind of question, I guess, is Jonas has spent his whole coaching career really in Sweden. And even though he's quite young, he's quite experienced. So I just wondered what the view of Jonas generally in around Swedish women's football is.
I think, it's kind of obvious. He's been coaching one of the best women's team in Sweden. So I think it's a great football to watch when he's coaching along the sideline, and he is very passionate and loud. Well, to me, I think he's the total opposite of Joe Montemurro along the sidelines, even though I've mostly seen Joe on television, but this year has been kind of different as well, because you have been able to hear the coaches along the sidelines, and if you have watched a game in the Damallsvenskan with Jonas, you can really hear him. He is a loud and vocal coach. And I think it's the best to describe that as with real passion, because he's definitely one of the most passionate coaches in the Damallsvenskan.
Yeah, and that really came across in our conversation with Anita as well. One of the things, so I always expected Arsenal to very closely guard the appointment process. And I wasn't necessarily expecting to find out who it was. And as you know, I didn't know who it was until the announcement dropped. But one thing I was expecting was I was expecting us to hire, perhaps a foreign coach. And I thought that maybe a story would drop in their local press. That's what happened with Joe Montemurro. Something dropped in the Australian press before it was announced. Personally, I didn't hear anything about this. Did you hear anything about the prospect of Jonas coming to Arsenal, and how has the appointment been greeted in Sweden?
You see, I think this is an interesting question, because I've been thinking about this a lot, when you read Swedish media around women's football, and then you read English media around women's football, and you have a total different culture than we. We are quite, if someone tells us to not say anything, we don't do it. So I think this is what has been happening here. No one has known about this, but in Swedish media, it's been like 2-3 articles per media outlet around this. So I think this is big in Sweden, and I think it is too. But I'm not that surprised that this has been happening, because the Swedish league, Damallsvenskan, we are known to develop young talents, and I think we have to apply that into this as well with coaches. Yeah. So I think it's happening now.
Yeah, and that was something else Anita was keen to mention, that actually he has a record of developing players, and he said, look, he's managed Marta, Hannah, like he's managed some big players, some really, really good players as well. And I guess just kind of staying with the overall reaction, we know that generally, certainly on the men's side, that Arsenal kind of has that link with Sweden because of some great Swedish players that Arsenal have had. And, the men's team very briefly had a Swedish manager last season. So, I wondered, you said there it was like it's quite a big deal. How much of a big deal is it that it's Arsenal that Jonas has come to?
Yeah, I think it is a big deal. This is the perspective of men's football and women's football as well. And on the men's side, Arsenal is probably seen as a top team still, but they aren't a top team. But in the women's game, Arsenal is seen as a big team. So I think it's big in Sweden because of that. and because of the fact that Arsenal has a great history in women's football. So, yeah.
And what's your personal take on the appointment?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I've been writing a lot of things around the Swedish national team these last days, and I write for Analytics FC, and we use Transfer Lab. It's a scouting tool just launched back in March for the women's game as well. And then I was like, it's no surprise that, and it's facts, that Leah Williamson is one of she is the center back in the WSL that takes most progressive runs. She's great with long and short passes. And then I was kind of curious about that because Arsenal have been struggled with high pressure. And then I went in to look now on the Rosengard players. And the center back in the Damallsvenskan also plays, she plays in Rosengard, who has the most progressive ball movement. And so I think it's going to be really interesting because in Sweden, Rosengard is the dominated team. But they don't necessarily, have, it's kind of like 50-50 ball possession, but they like to have the ball. And I've been kind of watching Arsenal, they haven't been comfortable with the ball. So I think it's going to be really interesting because I think Rosengard plays a very exciting football to watch, but they struggled last year to score. That's what cost them the title last year, and then they lost points, played like a 0-0 games and to teams at the bottom of the table, having the ball a lot but didn't manage to score. Even though they have like players, Anna Anvegård, about her. So yeah, I think it's going to be very exciting for Arsenal fans to watch what is going to happen now.
Yeah, definitely. And another thing, you referenced what Jonas is like on the sidelines, and I think that's something that's coming through clearly in a lot of conversations I've had. But is there anything else that you think Arsenal fans should kind of, some of the things maybe about him or his coaching style that will become apparent quickly, do you think?
Yeah, I think, I mentioned this before. He is a loud coach. I'm sure as a coach you will adapt to the culture, and you always, I take this course in football analysis now, and you have to be wary of how you transmit information and when you do it and stuff like that, and I'm sure if you know your players, you know where the limits are. But I think, he screams, he shouts, he's loud and vocal. I've never seen a coach in the Damallsvenskan who acts like him, and it's kind of fascinating to see. And I'm sure as a player, you either like that or you don't like it. So it's kind of extreme, either you get pushed and motivated or you don't.
Yeah, that's interesting. That was going to be my next question, actually, is that and one of the things Anita said, and obviously Anita played in Sweden for a long time and speaks the language and is very well integrated into the culture. And she said, actually, it's quite unusual for any coach to do that, but she said in Sweden it's really unusual. And one of the things I was going to ask is, do you think that there is a risk that some players, and I wonder if this has happened at Rosengard, whether there are just some players who've said, I can't hack this guy. Do you think there's a risk of that at Arsenal?
Well, yeah, obviously. It's always like that with extreme things. But then it is also like this. I think coaches adapt to a group of players, and I think you think. I get the feeling that even English people see Swedish people as very, calm, composed, and we don't show that many feelings. But I think we see English people even more like that.
Yeah.
So I think my first thought was actually when I saw he was appointed as head coach, I saw, this is going to be interesting to see him standing along the sidelines screaming at Vivianne Miedema like that. That was my first, But then again, you can turn things around and say that maybe this is what Arsenal needs.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it goes both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is going to be like a little bit of a culture change, certainly an approach, and that could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing, but it kind of depends at this stage. But I guess I'd ask, because one of the things I'm quite interested in with this appointment is obviously this is Joe Montemurro's squad, and there is no point in hiring a manager who wants to do something wildly different with it. So the fact that Jonas has managed like dominant teams in Sweden and generally plays attacking football, I think that was definitely what Arsenal were looking for. How would you describe the type of attacking football? Is it pressing? Is it possession? What kind of style did his Rosengard team play?
I think seeing Rosengard play, they want to have the ball. You can feel it all over. They want to have the ball all the time. And if they lose it, they know how to get it back. You can see teams wanting the ball, but you can also see them that they're not sure of, how are we going to take it back? But Rosengard knows how to take it back when they lose it. And I think that's kind of a standout in the Swedish league for that team. But then you have to be aware of the fact that I actually think the Swedish league is one of the most competitive leagues in the world. I'm going to say that now. I know that English people don't like to hear this because they say that the WSL is, but in Sweden, all teams can grab points from each other. I wouldn't, expect Arsenal to lose points versus Bristol City last season.
Yeah.
But Rosengard, they didn't manage to score and they didn't concede versus Djurgården last season, who is a bottom team. So I think you have to be aware of that when you watch, the kind of football the teams play. But I think what Rosengard and Jonas Eidevall might be having shown this season in Sweden is that they learned from their mistakes last season and they have fixed it now.
Yeah.
So it went fast, to fix the problem. And I think you don't see that very often with coaches and teams.
Yeah, and that's going to be a key thing for Arsenal because with the kind of response to high pressure, that's a big thing that Arsenal have to fix quite quickly. And there's probably not a lot else wrong with Arsenal other than that and injuries, I think, are the two main things. Another thing kind of Anita pointed out, was that, like I said earlier, like he has managed some big players, and Sweden definitely has this kind of reputation as a really strong women's league, but as an exporter of talent. I wondered if there were any players in particular, maybe at Rosengard or at his other jobs, where he could really point to as a success story that, I managed this player and I developed them and they went to Europe and they went to other European countries and were very successful.
Oh, now you're putting me on the spot here because my memory, I was thinking about last season. I'm going to turn it into this. I think we can give him credit for bringing the world Hanna Bennison. Mm-hmm. She hasn't left Rosengard yet, but she was appointed as goals, world's most promising talent. And he he managed her last season, so he managed to, show her off to the world. And I think that's more interesting in a way, because in Sweden, it's hard to tell that we have many teams in Sweden and coaches that has, managed to do that. Bring Europe some really great players from Sweden. Anita Asante is a very good example of that. Yep. I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And, speaking, he's already said in response to some questions from the Swedish press that he isn't going to go to Rosengard for players at this stage to bring with him to Arsenal, that he doesn't feel that would be appropriate. But Arsenal are being linked with Scandinavian players already, and one they're being linked with, again, not at Rosengard, but is I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation of Frida Maanum. What kind of player is she, and how good both is she and can she be? Because she's 21, but she's quite experienced.
Yeah, she's from my team, Linköping. She is described week in and week out, every round that's being played. From the Swedish media, she's seen as the Damallsvenskan's best player at the moment. So you can imagine she leaves Linköping, it's going to be a big hole in their squad. She is not the kind of player you are going to replace easily. She is the player in the Damallsvenskan that takes the most shots. Necessarily don't hit the target all the time, but she dares to take a shot, and she scores. No doubt about that. And she has been captain for Linköping, and that's also quite telling. I think she will have the chance in England to really show how good she is. Because in Sweden, in Linköping, she her whole team depends too much on her.
Yeah,
you can see that when they give her the ball in situations where she might lose it, but that's because the players around her might not be good enough to know when to give her the ball.
Yeah,
but if you give her the ball in the right moment, she can work wonder. She's fast. She moves like I joked with her sometimes a couple of weeks ago and asked her are you a gazelle or something, because she really moves like that.
And she plays in mid. She's an attacking midfielder, right?
Yeah, she is, and she can be used as a winger in the midfield as well. But she is a playmaker.
Yeah,
and I think, but she is a playmaker in the attack. But she never hesitates to run back to defend.
Yeah,
hardworking.
Yeah, and just in closing on that, are there, because there's some kind of talk about it. About Frida Maanum possibly coming to Arsenal. Are there, and obviously she's already, at the stage we're recording, she's already announced that she's leaving Linköping, and that announcement's been made. She's played her final game, scored in her final game, etc. Are those links with Arsenal, are they being made yet in the Swedish press?
No, and this is also kind of interesting. But yeah, get back to what I said before. Swedish press is like, that might not be true, because they've already written about Sofia Jakobsson and Kosovare Asllani before it was announced by the clubs. But no, I haven't seen anything that would link her to Arsenal in the Swedish media yet. But I would like to add also, she really is a great person. So whatever club in England is gonna get her, she is like, I've never it was a Linköping supporter that actually cried after the game, her last game. So because she was leaving, because they said that I've never met a player like her.
Yeah.
And that's true. I mean, I asked her to, record a video to send to one of her supporters in India. And then she was like, yeah, of course. And then she did it, and that went viral on Twitter. And that she is that kind of person. She's a good person.
Yeah, one to keep an eye on, and I think we know she's coming to England, and just fingers crossed it is Arsenal, because I think, not even just potential. There is potential in the player, but I think it's, as you say, that's a talent that's already there and already pretty formed, probably in a position where Arsenal could do with another player as well. But Mia, I've taken far too much of your time already. That was a really fascinating insight. Thank you so much for joining the show. And given that Arsenal now has a Swedish manager, I'm sure we'll talk again during the season.
Yeah, I hope so.
Big thanks to Mia Eriksson there for her insight. Again, very, very fascinating. Perhaps not as enthusiastic as Anita, but not unenthusiastic, it has to be said. But perhaps, a little bit of balance to the discussion there from Mia, and really appreciated her insight on Frida Maanum as well. And I've got my fingers crossed that Arsenal do get that deal over the line, because she's an incredibly exciting player. That's all we've got time for this month. Big thanks to our guests, Anita Asante and Mia Eriksson, and of course to our co-host, one of our co-hosts, Alex Ibaceta. Really hope that you've enjoyed this episode. We will have more episodes during the summer. We've got another one lined up for later this month, looking ahead to the Olympic Games in Tokyo. So we will be, we'll obviously preview that through an Arsenal lens. So we will preview the countries that have Arsenal representation, and look a little bit at some of the Arsenal players that are going to be playing in Tokyo in end of July, beginning of August. And then in August, obviously, we'll cover off the kind of the Champions League qualifying ties, a little bit about the transfer market, and a more general season preview. But I'm anticipating having that Olympics preview episode out in about 2 to 2.5 weeks' time. Already got some great guests lined up for that, some of whom you may be familiar with, who've been on the podcast before. But until then, thank you so much for downloading this episode. If you want to give us a rating and make it clear that it's the Arsenal Women Arsecast that you're rating, when you do, that would be hugely appreciated. It all helps just to kind of promote the podcast a little bit more. And of course, myself, Alex, Pippa, we're all completely open to your feedback on social media, where we are all very contactable and I hope very open and engaging. But until then, thank you so much for downloading and listening to the episode, and we'll talk to you again in a couple of weeks' time.